Hey there, Colonials. Welcome back to another edition of Quickly Colonial. And tonight, I came home from work and I decided, I'm hungry for soup and a salad. And what goes great with a soup or a salad? Well, I had to have something crunchy. I had to have something to dip into my soup, a big crust of bread or a cracker or something like that. And that got me thinking of colonial times. We have this tradition even today where we want croutons on our salad, or we have crackers with soup, or a big crust of bread, or something like that to have with our meal. And that got me thinking of colonial times, and they did the exact same thing. This idea of have something to dip in your soup, or whether you have gravy or leftover juices from a big piece of steak, that idea of sopping the mess up goes the whole way back, not only to colonial times, but also all the way back to medieval times. As a matter of fact, the very first instance that we hear of this concept of sopping something up comes from 1530. Historically, these little pieces of toast or baked bread was called a sop. Well, eventually it became what the colonials would call sippets. That sippet was a piece of bread, whether it was a triangle or fingers of bread, and they would serve it with some sort of a meal, something to sop up. Originally in colonial times, it got changed where it was just a garnish. It was just there to make your food look good. Then it would be served, and I have the triangles and also the fingers. These would be considered sippets, and you would dip those sippets into your soup. Or if you had some sort of gravy or something like that, you would dip those in there to get the last bit of that good stuff on there. The very first reference that we have to sippets is from 1530, and it came with a medieval recipe for peas and sippets. And so you would have these mashed up peas with a little bit of cream on top and salt and pepper and those types of herbs and things in there. And after you got done eating that soup, then you would take these sops or sippets and you would wring that around the bowl and get every last drop out of that. Eventually they became what the colonials called sippets. And the first reference to that was in 1685, The Accomplished Cook by Robert May. And he says to use it as a garnish on the dish. Well, later on, about, just under 100 years later, in 1764, the cookbook English Housewifery Exemplified also mentions these sippets, but for the purpose of sopping up all the mess. This concept, this idea goes the whole way into our modern times. My own grandmother, I remember her telling me when she was a little girl, she lived on a very large family farm, but they were poor. They didn't have much income. And so for breakfast, even this little girl, they had what was called coffee sup. And it was very simply a few slices of bread. Sometimes they would put butter on it, and they would pour coffee over the top of it. And they would take a spoon and eat that, that soggy, mushy bread and toast that they had made and soaked it with coffee. And she called it coffee sup. So this idea of bread used to sop up the mess, sop up all that good stuff left over after you've eaten a good hearty meal, that goes back a long, long time. Even back to our dear colonial times and sippets. My dear colonials, we'll see you next time. Cheers.